Okay, so the front side of our opener is percent increase and decrease. So, number one, a 49-cent bag of chips taxed at 1.5%. What's that going to end up costing you? So you go to the gas station, Circle K down the road here. You buy that bag of chips. You only have a certain amount of change in your pocket, so you need to know if you have enough money in your pocket to buy those chips after your tax is added. So the first thing I do when I'm doing percent increase, decrease is start at what number? 100%. So that's step one. I always start at 100%. Then step two says to do what?
Tax up, so add.
Good. So add or subtract my percent increase or decrease. As Darius said, it's taxed at, so that's going to be an add. So we're going to add 1.5%. Now you notice I'm putting my percent signs behind each number because I'm talking about percents here. So when I add those two together, what do I get, Darius?
101.5.
0.5 what? Percent. Okay, that's step two. Step three, Jemiah, what do I do? So I'm going to change it to a decimal. When you divide this by 100, Jemiah, what do you get?
1.015.
And what's this number called? It's circled on your...
A multiplier?
Yeah, multiplier. We're going to circle that. We're going to need that. Okay? Our final step then tells me to do what, Nick? So my original amount for the chips was 49 cents. Now I'm going to multiply that by my multiplier here. Do that in your calculator. You're going to get a big old long number. You're going to get 0.7935.
It's 0.49735.
There you go. Okay. So now we're dealing with money here. So if we're dealing with money, how many places past the decimal do I need to go? 2. So that's called the nearest cent, or it's the 100th place value. So everything behind that spot, we're going to drop. However, we need to know if I'm going to round that nearest cent or that 100th place value up. So you look directly to the right of it. Is that number 5 or greater?
Yeah.
Yes. So then that 9 goes to a 10, which means I add that 1 to the 4, which will be... So how much are those chips going to cost you? 50 cents. You could write it like... You wrote it like this.
Yeah.
That's fine too. Either one of those is fine. The biggest thing kiddos struggle with on this assignment is the rounding. Is making sure that you write it out in money form correctly. Okay. Now, I go to Maurice's over my lunch hour to get a new shirt for this weekend. There's a shirt in there that's $10, but they marked it up 40%, hoping to make some more money off of it. They decided once they marked it up 40% that they weren't making any money off of it, so then they discounted it 40%. So does that mean those two numbers will just cancel each other out and it's going to end up being $10?
No.
No. So what does that mean I'm going to have to do? How many multipliers am I going to end up with here? 2. Okay. So we're going to do steps 1 through 3 2 times. So step 1 again, start at 100%. My first one here marked up 40%. So what's that mean I do? So I'm going to add 40%, which equals... Okay, so that's step 1 and 2. Step 3 to get my multiplier, which is... Okay. So now I have to find out the multiplier for if it's discounted by 40%. So I do steps 1 through 3 again. So again, I start at 100%. Now, if it's discounted at 40%, what does that mean I do? Yeah, it's going to be a subtract. So it's going to be a decrease in price, which equals 60 what? Okay. Now what? So my second multiplier is 0.6. Now that I got both my multipliers, I'm ready to move on to the last step, which means I'm going to take the original amount of the shirt. Hey, you really need to be paying attention to what I'm doing. No, you put your book bag down. You don't need anything. Everything that you need for math is right in front of you. And you need to focus. So, move to the last step, which means you start at the original amount of the t-shirt, which is how much? $10. Make sure you have that dollar sign there. And you're going to multiply it by both multipliers. Again, don't show multiplication with the X or the little dot. Show it using parentheses. Okay, so we're going to take 10 times 1.4 times 0.6. When you do that, what do you get in your calculator?
8,047.
So this one we didn't have to worry about rounding at all. So $8.40. All right, once you have that down, go ahead and flip it over to the back. Flip it over to the back. Now, this is just strictly review of what we've been doing. It's just written differently. And, of course, I threw a little bit of a twist in there because we're going to have to do a little bit more rounding. Okay. So, we're converting between fractions, decimals, percents. When we convert to a decimal, we're going to round it to the nearest thousandth. How many places past the decimal point is the nearest thousandth? 3. 2 is hundredth, and 4 is 10,000th. Okay, now nearest percent, so when we round it to a percent, we're going to round it to the nearest tenth. So how many places past the decimal point is that going to be? 1, bless you. Okay, so first one, how do I convert a fraction to a decimal? Okay, so I'm going to show my work. So I'm going to take 2 divided by 11, and what do I get? 0. What? 18, that's it? Just 0.18? So does the 18 keep repeating? Okay, so we're going to round it to the nearest thousandth. So how many places past the decimal is the thousand spot again?
4,
3. So every number behind it we're going to drop. But I need to know, does this thousandths number, does it round up or does it stay the same? I know that by looking right behind it. The number right behind it, is that 5 or greater?
No.
8?
Oh.
Is that 8, 5 or greater? Yeah, so that 1 rounds up to a 2. So my answer is going to be 0.182. Okay. Now, from here, we're going to change this fraction to a percent. Or you can change this decimal to a percent. But this is where you're going to have to really pay attention to what you're doing, because I can't just take this decimal and change it to a percent, because that wasn't the full decimal amount, was it? No. So if I'm going to change it from the decimal to the percent, I'm going to have to use the decimal before I rounded it. Or I can just start at the top again and write it all out and then round it at the end. So what I prefer to do, I'm going to go from a fraction to a percent. So how do I change a fraction to a percent? Flip it.
Times it by 100.
Divide it, then times it. So I'm going to change it first to a decimal. So I'm going to take 2 divided by 11. Then I'm going to change that decimal to a percent by multiplying by what number? Multiplied by 100. So in your calculator, when you take 2 divided by 11 times 100, you're going to get 18.18 repeating, right? So we're going to end up with, like I just said, 18.18 repeating. Now, my percent directions tells me to round to the nearest tenth. How many place values behind the decimal is tenth? 1. So I'm going to underline the tenth spot. Everything else behind it, I'm going to cross out. However, I'm still going to need this 8 behind it to determine if I round that 1 up or if it stays the same. So the number directly behind the tenth, is it 5 or greater? So if your answer is yes, then that underlying number moves up to a, so my answer is going to be 18.2%. And then box it. So what I'll be looking for on your openers today when I grade them or Mr. McFarland grades them is that you're showing all your work like this. Okay, let's move down to the middle row. So now they give us the percent. We have 40%. We need to change that percent to a decimal and to a fraction. It doesn't matter where you start. You can choose to move that percent to a fraction first, or you can choose to write that percent as a decimal first. It does not matter. Kelsey, what do you want to do? Okay, so how do you change a percent to a decimal?
Divide by 100.
Okay, so I'm going to take 40, divide it by 100, and what do you get, Kelsey? 0.4. Okay? Now, I want you to change this percent to a fraction. How do you change a percent to a fraction? Darius? Yeah, it's out of 100. So that 100 becomes your, and the numerator is the, okay? Now, the 10 rule, the 0 rules, what can I do with the zeros at the end of each of these? Well, what can I first do since they both end in zeros? Yeah, so now I have 4/10. What is 4/10 both divisible by? What's 4 divided by 2? What's 10 divided by 2? So your final answer is? Good. Or you could use your calculator, type in 40 over 10, and just simplify it, and you're going to get the exact same answer. Deontay. All right, last one. So this last spot here, they're giving us the decimal. We need to change that decimal to a percent, and we also need to change that decimal to a fraction. Let's start with the easier one. What do you think the easier one's going to be? Changing it to a percent or a fraction? Percent. Yeah, so how can I change this decimal to a percent? What if I don't want to multiply by 100, though? I don't want to multiply by 100 this time. Yeah, so I'm going to take my decimal. I'm going to move it to the right 1, 2 times, and my answer is going to be 101.25, right? And what do I put behind that 25? Percent. Now, what if you absolutely hate moving your decimal to the right 2 times because it confuses you? The other way that you could do it is just take this number, multiply it by 100, and you'll end up getting the exact same answer. Okay? Red or green, doesn't matter, just show your work. Okay, last one. We're going to change this decimal, the 1.0125 or 1 and 125, what's the place value? 10 thousandths to a fraction. So Kelsey already told us the place value of our last digit 5 here is in the 10,000 spot. So my denominator is going to be 10,000. My numerator is going to be what then? Well, it's going to be this, the whole number with just the decimal gone, right? So it'll be 10,125. So basically, remember, your numerator is the decimal, it's the number, but you just take the decimal point out. So you have to put 10125. Now, sometimes when you go to simplify using your calculator and the denominator is 10,000ths, sometimes it'll give you a decimal. So go ahead and type in 10,125, fraction bar, 10,000 to see what you get. Change it back to an improper fraction.
You get 81 over 80.
81 over 80? Okay, good. So then it does simplify it for you. Good. Remember, I want answers as an improper fraction. Khan Academy wants it as a mixed number. All right. And that's it.